Apple's 2024 M4 iPad Pro was an incredible tablet computer, packing a best-in-class display, chassis, and chip. But Apple continues to push out new chips and products at a rapid clip, and the successor M5 iPad Pro was released a few short months ago. So today we'll be putting a base model M5 iPad Pro through the ringer in a variety of taxing games and benchmarks. Can this new version still run circles around demanding iPadOS workloads?
This video is brought to you by Digital Foundry and Ludeo. So here's an interesting idea. What if you could check out a game within seconds as a quick sampler, no installation or logins required? With Ludeo, you're able to do exactly that by near instantly playing bite-sized moments from games within your web browser. Just click the start button and away you go. It's all achieved through cloud streaming, where Ludeo's unique SDK is able to integrate with many of the industry's major engines. Think of them as instant demos. Jumping into Robocop Rogue City, for instance, Ludeo pits you against a 2-minute challenge to take down every enemy in sight, all played with a keyboard and mouse within your browser. This sampler of Hitman, World of Assassination also gets a challenge within a time limit, while smaller scale titles like Redacted get a moment in the spotlight. It's all in beta right now, and while there's room for Ludeo to grow, there's clearly loads of potential in the concept. From a player viewpoint, it removes friction between first hearing about a game and going hands-on with it yourself. It's an immediacy of access that plays to the strengths of cloud streaming. And from a developer standpoint, it offers another unique way to engage with players to improve a new game's discoverability to an audience with instantly accessible gameplay. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on Ludeo. So to play these moments right now, check out the links in the description below. And now back to the video.
Let's start with one of the iPad's most technically demanding games, Assassin's Creed Mirage. This 2023 action RPG epic fares just fine on our M5 iPad, logging a consistent 30 FPS update even with all settings maxed. It fluctuates a little here and there, but these blips are short-lived. I've cranked graphics quality to high and resolution scale to 100%, which produces a crisp, panel-matching output using metal effects with an internal resolution of 1210 by 682. This is letterboxed in a 16:9 window on the iPad itself. I'm not actually testing the top-end iPad Pro here. I have the 256GB 11-inch model with a stripped-back CPU core count and less memory. I have zero objections to the performance here. And if we dip back into our archives for some iPhone 17 Pro capture, we find a consistently lower performance level with settings maxed, at a fairly similar resolution. Next up is Grid Legends, the oft-ported 2022 arcade racer. Performance mode hits and holds a stable 60 frames per second update, with no dips, even during more intense sequences. This mode retains most of the game's visual feature set, including volumetric lighting and dynamic shadows, though SSR is absent. Metal HUD indicates a 1645 by 1134 resolution here, though internally it counts a bit closer to 1000p. The devs haven't availed themselves of Metal FX upscaling, instead leaning on TAA. Graphics mode keeps its 60 FPS target, though with substantial dips in more intense moments. Keep in mind here that the iPad screen, while capable of varying its refresh, doesn't use a fully content-driven VRR like we're used to seeing on PC and consoles, so these dips are very perceptible. Instead, the display chooses between a fixed number of refresh rates, and while gaming, it usually stays at 120Hz. At least the graphics mode gets settings bumps over its performance mode equivalent, including SSR, and resolution appears to match its 1134p stated output. Red Dead Redemption isn't the most taxing game around, with roots on Xbox 360 and PS3 consoles, but it's a game that had a maximum refresh of 40 FPS even on top-end iPhones, which was a curious choice given the relative capability of that hardware. On our M5 iPad though, those problems fade away. We can reach a full 60 FPS here in performance mode, and I couldn't spot any drops during gameplay. Cutscenes occasionally dip a frame or two, though it's not very obvious while playing. That's not much of an accomplishment perhaps, but it is worth noting given the somewhat depressed performance on phones. Internally, even with resolution scale pushed to the max, we're landing a roughly 1600 by 1200 render in my counts. It looks perfectly fine and plays very well, even if you would expect a bit more from a 16-year-old game. Resident Evil 4 is up next. Visual settings are a touch degraded here, and a 450p internal res doesn't look too flattering, though it's being scaled using metal effects to a reasonable 900p output. performance at least locks to 30 FPS in my gameplay, and the game's bouts of just-in-time shader compilation don't seem to phase its performance. Like virtually every other demanding iPad game, the vast majority of needed shaders are compiled at launch or during loading screens, though just-in-time stragglers pop up from time to time. That's perhaps not too surprising given that the game performed similarly on the M4 iPad we tested 2 years ago. If you're adventurous, you can dial in higher settings though, with a bit of .ini file tweaking. I toggled the framerate target to 60 FPS with otherwise default settings, and I was able to hit averages in the low to mid 50s in the demanding village encounter. This is a little bit too steep of a workload today, but for M6 or M7, perhaps a stable 60 FPS update will be achievable. Finally, we have Arknights Endfield. This free-to-play Unity RPG packs solid visuals on iPad, plus ray-traced reflections, which are evident on the ship here. I'm able to push settings to the absolute max and still log a smooth 60 FPS update during typical play. Internally, it counts to roughly 1728 by 1296, though again, foregoing metal effects in favor of TAA. Arknights leans on a roughly 3-minute shader burn, one of the longest I've seen on iPadOS, but it doesn't suffer from any apparent compilation stutter during gameplay. We don't cover a lot of live service games at Digital Foundry, but this one seems to be well put together and is somewhat technically promising. Like a lot of other live service titles, it's designed to scale to aged phones and tablets with specs well below our iPad here. But some considerable budget has clearly been expended, and the art and character modeling satisfies. The iPad Pro M5 plows through demanding titles with few issues. These games are mobile-first ports that typically aim for capabilities well below what an iPad can supply, so our M5 machine generally delivers solid frame rates and high visual settings. But to get a firmer sense of where this iPad lies, I've dived into a set of graphics benchmarks. First up is a pair of raster 3D mark benches, Steel Nomad Lite and Wildlife Extreme. Steel Nomad is a sophisticated test with modern visuals, and it flies on M5. iPhone performance is practically doubled here, while the last-gen M4 chip falls somewhere between the two more recent offerings. Wildlife Extreme represents older mobile graphics rendering tech, but it's pumped all the way to 4K resolution. The differentials look pretty similar here, with the iPad Pro again doubling the performance of the iPhone. That makes sense because the iPad Pro is more or less twice an iPhone architecturally. M5 has twice the memory bandwidth of A19 Pro, and 67% more shaders. GPU clock speeds aren't well documented, but I would imagine that typical frequencies likely exceed the iPhone as well. It's a bigger chip that's designed for Mac caliber workloads, and it comes with performance to match. Up next, we have a couple of ray tracing benches. Solar Bay is quite light and screams on M5, logging a frame rate well above 60 FPS. Solar Bay Extreme is a lot tougher and its performance level is correspondingly depressed, but both remain in the same rough performance proportion with the iPhone's weaker chip. I find the M4 a bit more interesting here. This chip slips a little from its previous standing, dropping from about 60 or 70% faster than A19 Pro to about 40% faster. It doesn't get the architectural bumps in the newer chips, including second-generation dynamic caching, which makes it less efficient in these kinds of demanding ray tracing workloads. The M4 gets its revenge in extended benchmark runs, however. If we run a test like Steel Nomad Lite in a stress test, the M4 machine has negligible throttling, while our fanless iPad struggles. Under extended heavy load, and actively cooled M4 actually has an edge over M5. iPhone 17 Pro throttles less than the iPad as well. The iPad's relative underperformance here isn't that surprising though. It has a relatively large chip for a fanless thermal design. Solar Bay Extreme is a similar story. The iPad declines a bit more here, but the iPhone 17 Pro also throttles a bit harder. Again, the M4 Mac Mini is a higher performer than M5 iPad, at least past the first benchmark run or two. It's important to stress, however, that this is close to a worst-case gaming benchmark. In actual game testing, I didn't notice any performance decline, even in games with unlocked frame rates. Graphics benchmarks tend to saturate the GPU quite effectively and aren't representative of typical workloads. It's also possible that the clock behavior differs a little bit between the two. Beyond our usual interesting gaming tests, I thought I'd evaluate the M5 iPad in multitasking and productivity workloads. Apple has pushed hard on iPadOS multitasking in recent years, including the introduction of Stage Manager a few years ago, and the adoption of a full windowed multitasking mode in the new iPadOS 26. iPads also support full cursor and keyboard input, and you can even hook your iPad up to an external monitor and operate it in an extended display mode. But I have mixed feelings on this push. Conventions that work well for a touch device on a small screen don't work for a pointer-based device on a large screen. Simple built-in apps like the music player are annoying to navigate with a mouse and keyboard, with unintuitive layouts that only make sense with swipes and touch input. Windows resize awkwardly and don't follow desktop operating system rendering conventions. Multi-monitor support is absent, and the device only has one port, which is quite limiting without an expensive powered Thunderbolt dock. The OS and apps aren't built for precision input and large displays. I imagine most users will never see this side of the iPad, because they stick to the default full-screen windowed mode that iPads have used historically, and those users will make limited or no use of cursor devices and monitors. But Apple has kind of made things worse for those users. iPad has supported split view for a very long time. It's essentially a simple multitasking workflow to view the contents of two apps at the same time. This is well suited for iPads, which have smaller screens, and apps tend to resize gracefully thanks to UIKit. iPadOS 26 has removed split view functionality, so if you have the full screen apps multitasking mode selected, you can't view two apps side by side anymore. There's similar functionality enabled if you want to use the windowed multitasking mode, but that mode is a poor fit for typical iPad use. Adding new features shouldn't come at the expense of core iPad capabilities. But fiddling around with music players and web browsers didn't seem like a good enough stress test for the iPad in productivity, so I dipped into a program I know very well, Final Cut Pro. I've been employed in various journalistic outfits for the past 11 years now, and Final Cut Pro has been my primary nonlinear editor for that entire period. But that's with the Mac version, not the newer iPad release. Initially, my experience was quite positive. Importing media is a breeze, and I was able to get my Razer Naga mouse working instantly. The trick is using a Naga variant with onboard memory, so you can edit profiles on a Mac and then use them on the iPad. Most of my shortcuts map perfectly onto FCP for iPad. Unfortunately, I did run into some issues. The iPad version doesn't support compound clips, which I tend to use extensively. The app has limited audio and video effects relative to the Mac version, and those effects have simplified controls. I wasn't able to dial in my usual compressor settings, for instance, because all the control surfaces I use have been scrubbed off. I can't copy and paste video clips between projects, which again is a core part of my Final Cut workflow. And I ran into issues with my habits during Final Cut editing. I tend to use music playback extensively while cutting video to keep myself from getting too bored, triggering music play pause using a Naga shortcut. Unfortunately, iPad doesn't support playing audio from multiple sources at once, and using my degenerate pattern of music playback inputs caused the program to freeze and need to be restarted. I don't think this is something Apple has tested for necessarily, but if you use more exotic input devices or workflows, you can easily run into these kinds of issues on the iPad. Beyond those hurdles, the app seems pretty good. Most of the interface elements have been shuffled around a bit, and many are hidden beneath toggles, but the changes make sense given the iPad's smaller screen. I was able to cut basic bits of footage together with no real issue, which is the core of most video edits. Someone who favors iPad could definitely take advantage of this program to edit professional video, just with more compromises than someone working off of a Mac. It's probably the most fully featured NLE available on an iPadOS or Android tablet, and it's not especially hard to use either. Those sentiments apply to a lot of the iPad workflows I see out there. It's the most capable dedicated tablet around, and it can handle a wide range of tasks, but oftentimes a Mac makes more sense. But this iPad app is doing something that is very exciting to me on a broader level. It's part of the brand new Apple Creator Studio, a $13 USD per month subscription that grants full access to the suite of Apple creative applications across both Mac and iPad. The one-time purchase versions of these applications aren't going away, but the CS versions have new content and in some cases, new features. I'm keen on the value proposition here. You get polished, slick tools for professional work at a remarkably low cost. A month of Adobe Creator Suite will run you $70 USD, or about 5.4 times more. I produced a review of the M4 iPad Pro about a year and a half ago, and most of my findings about that device apply equally here. The M5 Pro is still a razor-thin, ultra-premium tablet with a category-leading OLED display. It's still the apex of the iPad line, and it's clearly a few steps beyond premium tablet offerings from other vendors. Processing power gets a bump with this revision, and the low-spec models get a boost from 8GB of RAM to 12GB, but it's largely the same story. The productivity situation has changed somewhat since then, though, with the introduction of full-windowed multitasking and the Apple Creator Studio Suite. Even if it's hard to shake the feeling that Macs are a more flexible choice for most professionals. For consumption, though, this feels like a best-in-class combination of hardware and software. The iPad Pro is a brilliant piece of kit that provides the best possible vehicle for the iPad experience. If you want a tablet in your life, there's nothing better. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon at patreon.com/digitalfoundry for exclusive and early access content, and to get in touch, use social media.